My name is Ethan Caldwell. I'm 29 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my father threw my mother's wedding gift to me onto a polished marble floor in front of 160 guests. I still hear the sound it made. Not dramatic, not loud, just a dull, tired thud, worn leather meeting stone, small enough to miss if you weren't paying attention. Heavy enough that I'll never forget it. Neither will I forget what he said. Garbage belongs with garbage. He wasn't looking at the passbook when he said it. He was looking at my mother, then at me. The room had gone silent, crystal glasses frozen midair. A string quartet stalled halfway through a note. My father stood there in his tailored charcoal suit, jaw tight, eyes bright with something mean and embarrassed. The old blue bank passbook slid across the marble and stopped near a flower arrangement that cost more than my first car. What he didn't know, what none of us knew, was that the faded booklet he just called worthless carried something that would unravel everything I thought I understood about my family, about him, about my mother. A week later, I walked into First Harbor Bank in downtown Evanston with that same passbook in my hand. I almost didn't go. The last recorded balance printed inside was under $1,000, 800 and change. Nothing life-altering, nothing worth destroying a wedding over. But my mother had told me to go. She'd told me to ask for a man named Thomas Avery. She'd said it quietly, like she was handing me directions out of a burning building. So I went. The teller scanned the account number, and then her face changed. Her fingers stopped moving. Her eyes lifted slowly from the monitor to me, then back again. She swallowed. "Sir," she said carefully. Voice lowered. "Please don't leave." Behind the counter, a door opened. A gray-haired man in a three-piece suit stepped out and looked at me like I'd just walked out of a vault. And in that moment, standing under the brass lights of a bank that smelled like old money and paper, I realized the garbage my father had thrown away wasn't garbage at all. It was leverage, it was freedom, and it was about to change everything. My father's name is Charles Caldwell. In Northern Illinois commercial development circles, that name carries weight, not skyscraper in Chicago weight, but enough to get a table at the right country club and a handshake that lingers half a second longer than it should. He built Caldwell Development from a two-man remodeling crew into a mid-sized real estate operation that specialized in suburban retail plazas and medical offices. He drove a black Mercedes E-Class, rotated through 3 Rolexes depending on the meeting, liked to remind people he was self-made, as if that phrase alone made him immune to criticism. We grew up in a 5-bedroom brick colonial in Wilmette, the kind of house that looks solid from the outside, clean lines, trimmed hedges, flag by the door. Inside, success had a very specific definition. It looked like dominance. It sounded like authority. It never looked like me. "You've got my last name," my father told me when I was 16. "That means something. Don't waste it." What he meant was, take over the company, study finance, think bigger, stop wasting time on things that don't scale. Instead, I studied education, then counseling. I went into public school student support services. I worked with kids who couldn't concentrate because their parents were divorcing. Kids who were hungry. Kids who didn't know how to fill out a college application. My father called it charity work, disguised as a career. "You're too smart to be average," he said once across the dinner table. "You want to spend your life managing teenage feelings." I didn't argue. Arguing never changed anything. I learned early that silence conserved energy. My mother, Diane Caldwell, existed on the edges of our house. She kept it running with quiet efficiency. Groceries appeared, laundry folded itself, dinners materialized at 6 sharp, and every morning she left for her part-time job at a small accounting office in town. My father never let her forget how replaceable it was. "Balancing books for people who can't manage their own money," he'd say with a smirk. "Must be thrilling." She would nod, clear the plates, move on. For years, I thought that meant she agreed with him. My father had a phrase he liked to repeat when he'd had a glass too many of scotch. "In this house, men lead. Everyone else follows." He said it like scripture, and for a long time, I absorbed it without questioning where it left my mother or me. Because here's the truth: my father wasn't cruel, in a loud, obvious way every day. He was strategic. He chipped away. A comment here, a comparison there, a look that told you you'd fallen short of a standard that kept moving. I grew up believing my mother stayed because she had nowhere else to go, that she endured because she didn't know how to leave. I mistook her silence for surrender. I didn't understand that sometimes silence isn't submission, sometimes it's calculation. And I definitely didn't understand that while my father was busy building properties, with his name stamped across the front. My mother was building something else entirely, something he never bothered to see. I met Olivia Bennett on a Thursday in late September. I was supervising a group of seniors from Northridge High during a college prep tour at a downtown redevelopment project. She was there, representing her firm, Bennett Urban Design Consulting, on sustainable housing layouts. I'd just finished breaking up an argument between two 17-year-olds about who lost the bus roster when I turned and nearly walked straight into her. She caught my arm before I collided with a stack of rolled blueprints. "Careful," she said, smiling. "Hard hat zone." I wasn't wearing one. Neither was she. We got coffee after the tour because she asked about my students. Not politely, not to fill space. She wanted to know their names, their plans, what they were afraid of. No one in my father's orbit ever asked those kinds of questions. We dated for 2 years, 2 steady, uncomplicated years. No performances, no transactions disguised as affection. She liked that I loved my job. She didn't treat it like a stepping stone I'd eventually outgrow. When I talked about a student who'd finally passed algebra after months of tutoring, she listened like it mattered, because to her, it did. Her family was different from mine in ways that were hard to explain without sounding dramatic. Her father, Robert Bennett, ran a regional infrastructure firm based in Chicago. Bigger than my father's operation, not flashy, just solid. Municipal contracts, public-private partnerships, the kind of work that doesn't need a champagne tower to prove its value. The first time I had dinner at their lakefront condo, I expected subtle interrogation. Instead, her mother asked what I found most challenging about supporting teenagers who didn't believe in themselves. Her father asked how school funding actually worked. Not once did they ask what Caldwell development was worth. When Olivia and I got engaged, my father didn't congratulate me. He asked about Robert Bennett's portfolio, transportation contracts he said over the phone. Tone sharpened with interest I'd never heard directed at my life choices. That's serious money. He called me for the first time in almost 5 months, the day after the announcement, not to ask about the proposal, not to ask about Olivia, but to clarify whether her father's firm had expansion plans in the suburbs. 3 days later, he invited me to his office, the mahogany desk. Framed aerial photos of developments he'd built, the faint smell of leather and control. "I'll cover the wedding," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Venue, catering, everything. Consider it my gift." He'd never spent more than $100 on my birthday without mentioning it twice afterward. Now he was offering to write checks with 5 digits, like it was nothing. I should have said no instead. I looked at Olivia, who squeezed my hand under the desk. "Maybe he's trying," she whispered later in the parking lot. Maybe. I wanted that to be true more than I wanted to be right. Within a week, my father had booked Ridgeway Country Club, a place he wasn't even a member of, but had tried to join for years. He selected the band, the florist, the caterer, gold-embossed invitations that cost more than my monthly rent. The guest list ballooned to 160 names. I recognized maybe 40 business associates. He said when I questioned it, "Important people." Important for what? He didn't specify, but I knew. My wedding wasn't becoming a celebration. It was becoming a stage, and my father had always loved an audience. Once, my father took control. The wedding stopped feeling like ours. It moved fast, too fast. Deposits wired before Olivia and I had finalized a guest list. Contracts signed without asking what we actually wanted. A string quartet instead of the small jazz trio Olivia had mentioned liking. Imported white orchids instead of the simple greenery she'd saved on her phone for months. "It needs to look like something," my father said when I pushed back once. "People remember impressions. People, not family, not us." He toured Ridgeway Country Club like a general inspecting territory. Adjusted table placements, critiqued lighting angles, repositioned the champagne tower twice because it didn't photograph with enough authority. He was spending just under $90,000 by the time everything was locked in. I knew he'd leveraged a line of credit. I didn't ask. He didn't volunteer. The more elaborate it became, the smaller I felt inside it. Olivia noticed. She didn't complain. She rarely did. But at night, when the house went quiet and we lay in the dark, she'd say, "It feels like we're guests at our own event." She wasn't wrong. The week before the invitations went out, my mother found me in the backyard. She moved the way she always had, quiet, precise, almost invisible until she was beside you. "Ethan," she said softly, pressing something into my hand. It was small, worn. Blue leather faded at the corners. "I have a gift for you," she said. "I'll give it to you properly on your wedding day." I looked down at it. An old bank passbook, First Harbor Bank, embossed faintly across the front. The gold nearly gone. What is it, I asked. The most important thing I own. Her voice didn't shake. Her fingers did. No matter what anyone says, she added, holding my gaze longer than usual. Don't throw it away. I almost smiled. It felt dramatic for something that light in my palm. I won't, I said, but something in her eyes stopped me from treating it like a sentimental relic. There was intention there, not nostalgia. A memory surfaced that night as I sat alone in my childhood bedroom. I was 14, homesick from school. I'd walked past my parents' room and heard my mother counting. Soft, methodical. Bills stacked neatly on the comforter. Not much money, a few hundred at most. She'd seen me in the doorway and closed a small notebook quickly. Not guilty, focused, just grown-up things, she'd said. I never asked about it again. Kids don't. We assume our parents' lives are fixed. Permanent. Sitting there years later, suit hanging pressed in the closet, wedding looming 12 hours away. I wondered what she'd been building back then, and why she'd had to hide it. Downstairs. My father's voice carried through the house as he took another call. Yes, he was saying, Robert Bennett will be there. Of course he will. The wedding was supposed to mark the beginning of my life with Olivia. Instead, it was starting to look like the culmination of my father's, and somewhere in the middle of it, my mother was waiting for something. Ridgeway Country Club looked like a magazine spread the morning of the wedding. White roses spilled from crystal vases, linen draped over round tables in perfect symmetry. A champagne tower rose near the center of the reception hall, like a monument to excess. Outside, the lawn had been trimmed within an inch of precision. Rows of ivory chairs faced a floral arch that probably cost more than my first year of college. From the upstairs groom's suite window, I watched my father orchestrate it all. He moved across the patio in a dark custom suit I'd never seen before. Cufflinks caught the sun when he gestured sharply at a caterer, adjusted a server's tray, repositioned a photographer. He didn't look like a father, preparing to give a speech about his son. He looked like a producer, managing a premiere. You good, my best man? Tyler asked from behind me. Yeah, I said. I wasn't, but I didn't need to narrate that out loud. When Robert and Elaine Bennett's car pulled up an understated black sedan. No flash, no entourage. My father straightened immediately. His shoulders squared. His smile shifted, softer, warmer, calculated. He crossed the lawn before Robert had fully closed the door. Robert, Elaine, welcome, welcome, he said. Voice lowered half a tone, like they were already partners. From the window, I could see Olivia through the glass doors of the bridal suite. She stood near the mirror, calm, centered. She caught my eye for a second and smiled. That part was real. Near the rose garden, my mother stood alone. She wore the pale gray dress my father had chosen for her, instead of the deep green she'd liked. Her hands were clasped loosely in front of her. Guests drifted around her without really seeing her. She didn't try to insert herself into conversations. She just watched. When she noticed me looking down from the window, something passed between us. Not fear, not sadness exactly, recognition. The ceremony itself was clean, simple in structure if not in cost. Olivia's hand in mine steadied everything. When she said, I do, her voice didn't waver. Mine didn't either. For a few minutes, none of the performance mattered. Then we turned to face the crowd. My father was beaming, not at me, at Robert Bennett. He was already thinking ahead. Conversations to be had, doors to be opened, connections to solidify. In the front row, my mother's eyes were red. Her hands gripped each other tight enough that her knuckles had gone white. She wasn't smiling. Your mom okay? Olivia murmured as we walked back up the aisle. She's fine, I said automatically, but something in my chest said she wasn't. During cocktail hour, I watched her hover at the edge of the room. Once. She reached for my father's sleeve as he laughed too loudly beside Robert. Not now. Diane, he muttered without looking at her. She withdrew her hand slowly, like she'd practiced that movement for years. By the time the reception started, the air felt heavier. My father had switched to scotch, not sloppy, not yet, but louder. His stories grew, his revenue numbers inflated. 17 million last year, I heard him say near the bar. I knew for a fact Caldwell Development hadn't cleared 5. Robert Bennett's expression stayed neutral, polite, observant. He didn't challenge him. He didn't agree either. Across the room, my mother stood near a column, watching everything unfold. Waiting. For what? I still didn't know, but I could feel it building. Pressure behind glass. And when the MC's voice finally cut through the room, announcing the start of family gifts, my father straightened like a man stepping into a spotlight he'd been rehearsing for weeks. The calm was over. The performance was about to peak. By 8 o'clock, my father had crossed the line from polished to loud. Not falling down drunk. He would never allow that, but the kind of drunk that sharpened his edges instead of dulling them. His laugh carried too far. His hand stayed on Robert Bennett's shoulder a second too long. His voice kept rising half a notch with every refill. I watched him from across the ballroom as he steered Robert toward the champagne tower like it was an exhibit. Retail's evolving, he was saying. We're pivoting commercial, big municipal bids coming. You'll see our footprint expand soon. Robert nodded, expression unreadable. He had the look of a man who had already done his homework. Olivia slipped beside me. He's performing. He always is, I said. The difference tonight was the stakes. My father wasn't just selling competence, he was selling relevance. And when you build your identity on dominance, being outmatched feels like exposure. The MC tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the family gifts. My father moved before anyone else could. Ethan and Olivia, he began, voice wrapped in artificial warmth, from the Caldwell family. A contribution toward your future. He held up a thick envelope made of textured black leather, embossed with gold lettering. Even the envelope had a presence. A check for $75,000. Applause filled the room. Polite, impressed. I knew that money wasn't liquid. I knew he'd leveraged credit to write it, but perception was what mattered to him. He turned slightly, making sure Robert had a clear view. For stability, he added. For growth. I nodded once. Thank you. Short. Controlled. Robert and Elaine approached next. No announcement, no flourish. Robert handed Olivia a small navy box. Inside was a single key to a townhouse in Lakeview. He said simply, "It's been in our family for years. We thought you two might want to start there." The room shifted. A townhouse in Lakeview wasn't a symbolic gift. It was generational wealth. There was no applause at first, just silence. I glanced at my father. It was quick, less than a second, but I saw it. Calculation, comparison, humiliation. His $75,000 had just been reduced to a gesture. His jaw tightened. His smile sharpened into something thinner. How generous, he said, tone slightly off balance. That was the moment something inside him tilted. When a man measures love in spectacle and loses the spectacle, he looks for something smaller to dominate. The MC glanced at his list. And now, he said, from the mother of the groom, Diane Caldwell. My mother stood slowly. She wasn't holding a velvet box. She wasn't holding an envelope. She was holding the faded blue passbook, small, worn, almost invisible against the marble and gold. My stomach tightened. She walked toward us without taking the microphone. The room quieted, not because she commanded it, but because something about her stillness demanded attention. She stopped in front of me. "Ethan," she said, voice steady, "this is my gift to you." She placed the passbook in my hands. Light, old, insignificant to anyone who didn't know better. "It's everything I've saved," she said softly. "I want you to have the freedom I didn't." Whispers rippled through the room. A savings book. That's it. How old is that thing? I didn't look at the guests. I looked at her. There was no shame in her face, only resolve. "Thank you, Mom," I said quietly. I meant it. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape hard against the floor. My father was standing. And the expression on his face wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was threat. What exactly is that supposed to be? My father didn't shout at first. He stepped forward, glass still in his hand, eyes fixed on the passbook like it had personally insulted him. My mother didn't answer. She stood where she was, hands folded loosely in front of her. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. "It's my gift," she said evenly. "For Ethan, a gift." My father let out a short, humorless laugh. "You bring a savings book to this reception, in front of the Bennetts." The room was completely silent now. 160 people pretending not to stare. He moved faster than I expected. Before I could react, he reached out and snatched the passbook from my hands. A balance of what he continued, flipping it open with exaggerated motions. A few $100s. I saw the old printed number. 800 and change. The same figure I'd seen the night before. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time, Diane," he said, voice rising. "Charles," my mother warned quietly. 30 years, he went on, ignoring her. 30 years, and this is what you contribute, a relic, a charity case. He turned toward the crowd. "I apologize to our guests," he announced loudly. Apparently my wife thought this was the appropriate place for sentimental nonsense. The word sentimental landed like an insult. He looked back at the passbook in his hand, then he threw it. Not hard, not violently, just dismissively. The faded blue cover hit the marble floor with a flat, hollow sound and skidded across the stone until it stopped near the base of a rose arrangement. "Garbage belongs with garbage." The words echoed against the chandeliers. No one moved. Not the servers, not the musicians, not the Bennetts. My mother didn't flinch. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't reach for the passbook. She didn't defend herself. She didn't look down. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something I had never noticed before. Not weakness. Control. Olivia's hand tightened around mine under the table. I could feel her shaking, not from fear, but from restraint. "I swear to God," she murmured, half rising from her chair. "Don't," I said. My voice surprised even me. Steady, low. If anyone threw a punch tonight, my father would become the victim. He would spin it. He would turn it into an attack against him. I'd grown up watching him rewrite narratives in real time. I wasn't going to give him that. Across the room, Robert Bennett stood slowly. His expression had gone cold. "Robert," my father began, smile snapping back into place. "This is just a family misunderstanding. I've seen enough," Robert said. His tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. My father's mask flickered. The passbook still lay on the floor. I released Olivia's hand and stood up. Every movement felt amplified in the silence. My shoes clicked against the marble as I stepped down from the head table and walked past my father without looking at him. He tried to catch my eye. "Ethan," he said sharply, "sit down." I didn't. I bent and picked up the passbook. One corner had folded slightly from the impact. I smoothed it flat with my thumb. It weighed almost nothing. When I straightened, I faced my mother. "Thank you," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. "This is the most meaningful gift I've received tonight." My father made a sound of disbelief. I didn't turn toward him. I leaned down and kissed my mother's cheek. She was trembling now, but not from humiliation, from release. Then I turned back to the room. "We're done here," I said. Olivia was already standing beside me. "Ethan," my father barked, "the reception isn't over. You will not embarrass me like this in front of—" I looked at him then. Not angry, not emotional, just finished. "I don't need your permission," I said, "and I don't need your approval." His mouth opened, closed, for once. He had no prepared line. Olivia took my hand. Together, we walked toward the exit. Behind us, I could hear my father's voice rising again. Words about disrespect, about everything he'd paid for, about loyalty. None of it followed me out the door. The marble floor, the chandeliers, the champagne tower, all of it stayed behind. And in my hand, the thing he'd called garbage felt heavier than it had a minute ago. Not because of what it was, because of what he had just revealed about himself. We didn't run. That was important to me. We walked through the double doors of Ridgeway Country Club, past the valet stand, past the stunned faces of guests who didn't know where to look. The night air hit my face like cold water, crisp, clean, real. Behind us, through the glass, I could still see my father gesturing wildly, his silhouette sharp against the ballroom lights. He looked smaller from the outside. Olivia squeezed my hand once. Not a question, just contact. "You okay?" she asked when we reached the steps. "I am now," I said. It was the first honest sentence of the night. Robert and Elaine followed us out moments later. No drama, no raised voices, just measured steps. Robert looked at me for a long second. "You handled that well," he said quietly. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel powerful. I felt clear. "He showed everyone who he is," Robert added. "You didn't have to, inside." The music tried to restart. It sounded thin. My phone buzzed almost immediately. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. I knew it was him. Livia's driver pulled the car around. As we slid into the back seat, I looked down at the passbook again. The corner was still slightly bent. I smoothed it once more. "He's going to spiral," Olivia said softly. "I know. And you're not going back in?" No. That was the boundary. Not loud, not theatrical, just solid. We didn't go to a hotel. We didn't go back to my parents' house to collect anything. We drove straight to the townhouse in Lakeview, the one Robert had quietly handed us the key to, an hour earlier. The house was dark when we entered, empty, waiting. Olivia turned on a single lamp in the living room. Warm light spilled across hardwood floors. The silence felt different here. Not heavy, not tense, free. She kicked off her heels and exhaled. "That was supposed to be our wedding night," she said. "It still is," I replied. "Just not the version my father had choreographed." We ordered takeout we barely touched. I loosened my tie but didn't change out of the suit right away. It felt symbolic to stay in it for a while. Like shedding it too quickly would mean I was still reacting. The passbook rested on the coffee table between us. "You don't have to open it tonight," Olivia said. "I know, but I couldn't stop touching it," running my thumb over the worn letters. "First Harbor Bank, Evanston." My mother's voice replayed in my head. "I want you to have the freedom I didn't. That wasn't about $800. It was about something else." At 6:02 a.m., my phone lit up with 17 missed calls. All from my father. The voicemails moved in cycles: rage, threat, persuasion, fake regret. "You humiliated me. You'll get nothing from me, son. We can fix this." I deleted them without listening all the way through. Then I blocked his number. Olivia watched me do it. "You sure?" she asked. "Yes." My mother's text came 10 minutes later. Short, precise. Ethan, I'm sorry for last night. Your father doesn't understand what he threw away. Go to First Harbor Bank, Evanston Branch. Ask for Thomas Avery. Show him the passbook. He'll explain. I love you. I read it twice. Then a third time. There's an account number in here, I said, flipping the passbook open. Last entries from years ago. Balance says $842. Olivia frowned. That can't be what she meant. No. I closed it slowly. She told me not to throw it away. I stood up. We're going to the bank. First Harbor Bank's Evanston branch looked like it had been carved out of another century. Stone columns, brass door handles polished to a dull glow. Inside, the air carried the scent of paper and old leather. Quiet, controlled. The kind of place where money didn't shout. Olivia walked beside me, her hand brushing mine but not gripping it. She knew better than to hover. We stepped up to the first open teller window. "Can I help you?" the young woman asked, her name tag reading Claire. I slid the passbook across the counter. "I'd like to check the balance." She took it with mild curiosity. Passbooks were relics now, decorative pieces for grandparents. She typed in the account number, then she stopped. Her posture changed first, shoulders stiffening, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She glanced at the screen again, then at me. "Sir," she said carefully, voice lowering, "would you mind waiting just a moment?" She didn't wait for an answer. She stood, pressed something under the counter, and disappeared through a door marked "Employees Only." Olivia shifted beside me. "That's not normal." No, my pulse didn't spike. It narrowed. 30 seconds later, the door reopened. A silver-haired man in a dark three-piece suit stepped out. Measured walk. Controlled expression. "Mr. Caldwell?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Thomas Avery, branch manager. Would you and your wife please come with me?" He gestured toward a frosted glass door, labeled "Private Banking." "And please," he added quietly, "don't leave." The private banking room was insulated from the lobby noise, Persian rugs, oil paintings. A desk that likely cost more than my first year's salary. Mr. Avery sat, opened the passbook carefully. "Do you know what this account is?" he asked. "A savings account," I replied. "My mother gave it to me at my wedding." "It is more than that." He turned his monitor toward me for a moment. My brain refused to process the number on the screen. The decimals didn't move. The commas didn't shift. They were steady. "The passbook," he continued, "is the access key to a trust established 26 years ago. Your mother is the settlor. You have been the designated beneficiary since birth." Olivia inhaled sharply. I didn't. I stared at the number. $2,300 and 86,417.22. "That's the current balance," Mr. Avery said gently. The room didn't tilt. My breathing didn't spike. The world simply narrowed to the glow of the monitor. "Explain," I said. "An initial contribution of $250,000 was deposited in 1998, an inheritance from your grandmother, Eleanor Brooks. It was classified as separate property under Illinois law and placed into a trust under your mother's maiden name, Diane Brooks. Maiden name, separate property, strategic. She made consistent monthly deposits." He continued, "Modest amounts, invested conservatively, compounded over decades." He turned the screen slightly, showing a graph. A line climbing steadily, quietly. No spikes, no gambling, just patience. "She visited annually," he added. "On your birthday, without fail." I swallowed once. "She came alone." "Yes, of course she did. My father controlled everything," I said. "Your mother ensured this was legally independent." Mr. Avery replied, "It was never commingled with marital assets. He would not have seen it unless he went looking, and he never did." "No, he wouldn't have." He handed me a cream envelope sealed with dark wax. "She left this in the file, to be opened when you claimed the account." My name was written across the front in my mother's careful script. I broke the seal. The paper inside was simple. One page. "Ethan, if you are reading this, you have found your freedom. This money was never about wealth. It was about choice. I stayed because you needed stability, not because I was trapped. I have been preparing for years. You owe no one your silence. Live without fear. Love, Mom." I read it twice, then folded it once, cleanly. "She wasn't powerless," I said. Mr. Avery met my eyes. "No, sir. She was patient." There was one more folder on his desk. "There is additional documentation," he said carefully. "Your parents executed a legal separation agreement 21 years ago." I looked up. "A what?" "They remained in the same residence, however. Your mother's financial and legal interests have been protected independently since that time. 21 years, living under the same roof, playing the role, building leverage." "She was waiting," Olivia whispered. "No, she wasn't waiting. She was building. And the man who called her gift garbage had no idea he'd just thrown a key to a vault onto a ballroom floor. I didn't call my father. I called my mother. She picked up on the first ring. 'You went to the bank,' she said. 'Yes.' Silence on the line for half a breath. Not nervous, measured. 'I know about the trust,' I said, 'and the separation agreement. Another pause. Mr. Avery told you, she replied softly. 21 years. Yes. I leaned back in the leather chair, staring at the ceiling of a room built for people who never panic about numbers. You stayed in the house with him all that time. I stayed for you, she said. Not because I had to, because I chose to. The distinction mattered. I didn't want you growing up in courtrooms, she continued, or in a custody battle where money would be weaponized. Stability mattered more than comfort. You could have left. I could have, she agreed. I had the funds. I had legal protection. I had options. Options. The word hit harder than the number on the screen had. I needed you to become independent first, she said. Financially, emotionally, beyond his reach. I thought about the passbook sliding across marble, about her standing still while he shouted, about the way she had looked at me not defeated, not ashamed, prepared. You knew he'd react like that, I said. I suspected, she replied. Your father has always struggled when he can't control the narrative. That's why you told me not to throw it away. Yes. There was no bitterness in her voice. No revenge, just clarity. I've already spoken to my attorney, she added. The divorce filing will be served this week. He doesn't know. He knows we're separated legally, she said. He never believed I would enforce it. I almost smiled. He had mistaken quiet for weakness. Again. I've had an apartment in Oak Park for nearly 3 years, she continued. Small, paid in full through the trust's discretionary allowances. I was waiting for the right moment. You mean my wedding? Yes, not because she wanted drama, because she wanted timing. You were never trapped, I said. No, she exhaled softly. I was patient. I closed my eyes for a second. All those years I'd believed she endured, because she couldn't escape. I had inherited that assumption from him. That hurt more than the wedding. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For not seeing it. You were a child, she replied gently. And later, you were surviving in your own way. That's not blindness. That's adaptation. There was a rustle on her end of the line. I don't want you to use that money for anger, she added, or to prove anything. I won't. What do you want to do? I looked at Olivia, who was watching me quietly from across the desk. No pressure, no suggestion. I want distance, I said, and choice. My mother laughed softly, not mocking, relieved. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. I lowered the phone slightly. One more thing, I said. Yes. When he realizes he can't touch it, he's going to call. I know, she answered. And this time, you don't have to answer. For the first time in my life, the power dynamic in our family had shifted. Not because anyone yelled louder. Not because anyone won an argument. Because the illusion had collapsed. My father had built his authority on the belief that he controlled the resources. He never realized the most important one had been out of his hands for 2 decades. And now it was out of his reach entirely. My father found out 3 days later, not from me, from a courier standing in the foyer of the house. He'd spent 30 years upgrading to impress other men. The divorce papers were delivered mid-afternoon. Diane Brooks listed as petitioner, not Diane Caldwell. Brooks. He called me that night. I didn't block him this time. I wanted to hear it. Ethan, he said, voice tight. What did you tell her? Nothing. She says she has her own assets. That's impossible. No, I said. It's not. Silence. You think this is funny? He demanded. You and that Bennett family think you can undermine me. This isn't about the Bennetts. Then what is it about? It's about the fact that you never looked at her, unless she was serving you. His breathing changed. Faster. She'll come back, he said finally. She has nowhere to go. She's already gone. That stopped him. What do you mean? She has her own apartment. Has for years. Another silence. I could hear the shift. Not anger. Not yet. Disorientation. That's not possible, he muttered. I would have known. You didn't ask. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just stated it. He pivoted, like he always did. Fine. We'll work this out. Get Robert Bennett on the phone. I need to clarify some misunderstandings. There it was. Even now. I'm not doing that, I said. Ethan, you don't understand what's at stake. I do. And for the first time, I did. He wasn't afraid of losing my mother. He was afraid of losing leverage. I don't need anything from you, I said. Not money, not approval. You'll regret that, he snapped. Maybe, I replied, but it won't be because I stayed. I ended the call. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was quiet. 2 development meetings were rescheduled indefinitely. A municipal bid my father had been confident about was awarded elsewhere. No one cited the wedding directly, but in professional circles. Reputation doesn't collapse loudly. It erodes. Robert Bennett never returned his calls. When my father showed up uninvited at our townhouse one evening, flowers in one hand, a bottle of scotch in the other, I didn't step aside. You need to leave, I told him. I'm trying to apologize, he said. For the wedding, to everything. His eyes flicked over my shoulder. Is Robert here? Yes, I said. And no, he won't be coming out. Right on cue. Robert stepped into the hallway behind me. Mr. Caldwell, he said evenly, I do business with men who treat their families with respect. That's non-negotiable. My father's jaw tightened. You don't know what she put me through. Robert didn't blink. I saw what you did, he said. That was enough. The door closed. My father stood on the stoop a few seconds longer. Then he walked away. Not ruined, not destroyed, just exposed. My mother moved into her Oak Park apartment that week. She cut her hair shorter than I'd ever seen it. Painted the living room a deep blue she'd always liked. Started volunteering full-time with a nonprofit that helped women navigate financial independence. She told me once over coffee, I forgot what it felt like to make a decision without bracing for backlash. Now she didn't brace. She simply decided. The trust remained untouched for months. I didn't quit my job. I didn't buy a car. I didn't move into a penthouse. Instead, I worked with an advisor and established the Eleanor Brooks Education Fund named after my grandmother. 5 scholarships a year, students from underfunded districts, tuition support, books, housing stipends. Olivia asked why I didn't put my name on it. It wasn't built in a day. I said, it was built in silence. We bought a house outside the suburbs my father dominated. 3 bedrooms, a yard, nothing extravagant, sturdy. When our daughter was born 2 years later, we named her Eleanor. My mother held her in the hospital room. Silver hair pulled back, face calm. She won't have to prepare in secret, she said. No, I replied. She won't. I keep the passbook framed in my office now. Visitors sometimes ask about it. Old savings account, they'll say. Something like that. I answer. They ask how much was in it. I tell them the number, if they insist. But that was never the point. The point was that the smallest object in the room had held the most power, and the loudest man in the ballroom had understood the least. My father still calls on holidays. I don't block him. I don't answer either. Distance isn't hatred, it's maintenance. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be quiet, like everything that actually matters. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose distance over performance, share your experience below. Someone else might need to read it. This story is fictional and created for narrative purposes only.